So I would like to call this meeting of February 26, 2024 to order and recognize that we are gathering on the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation, and we are grateful for their care and stewardship of these lands since time immemorial. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda with the removal of the Heritage Committee minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. And adoption of regular council meeting minutes.
So moved.
And a
Second.
second. Thank you. And all in favor? And then receipt of the Heritage Committee minutes from February 15th, 2024.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Thank you. All in favor? And that is carried as well. And Ryan's up. Noise control bylaw exemption request for 2024 summer concert series. Because it's almost summer,
Almost summer.
except it's going to snow.
You'd never
So-
know, yeah. It's not quite as almost summer as I'd like. As I think most of you know, for the last couple summers, we the Village has partnered with Elevate the Arts Society on the delivery of the summer concert series. So concerts at Village Square on Thursday evenings. They have been going from 7 p.m. to approximately 9:30 p.m. In the past, well, last year anyways, we have approved a noise exemption bylaw. Basically, the noise bylaw allows the concerts to go until 8 p.m. So staff have approved an exemption until 10 p.m. last year, with the understanding that the concerts that the organizer would aim to wrap them up by 9:15. But they wanted that contingency in case things got delayed and yada yada. So last year, just in light of that, we started kind of having some conversations around whether 9:30 was a bit late for these concerts, family-friendly concerts, to be happening in the heart of the village. That said, we were only able to dig up one documented noise complaint about them. So that was positive. And generally, the sense we got at a staff level was that they seemed to be pretty well received by the village, and they seemed to be appreciated. So that was positive as well. So for 2024, Elevate has once again requested a noise bylaw exemption until 10 p.m., which after some conversation, they agreed to reduce to 9:30 p.m. So that is the request that's put forward. The plan is, just like in last year's, the concerts would feature two performances. There'd be an opening act at 7 p.m., then a headliner at 8. The applicant, Elevate, feels pretty strongly that that noise exemption to 9:30 is important for them to be able to deliver the quality of entertainment that they have been. In the report, we've recommended that that be approved, but obviously we thought it was important enough that we put it out to you and let you weigh in on it.
Thank you, Ryan. Council, questions?
Love it. I approve.
Yeah, the first thing I would ask is about the feedback, and you said that there was just the one negative feedback, so I don't see why we wouldn't approve it. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we do before the series starts in June or July.
July runs through July and August.
Yeah, so I mean it's daylight till 10 o'clock at that point. So I think the 9:30 is fine. I think 10 is fine too. But do we do any kind of notice to the neighborhood, or we put it out I guess we put it out in Currently Cumberland or something?
I don't know if we've had it in Currently Cumberland in the past, but it's something we're trying to get more proactive with that kind of communication this year. I mean, we posted on the Cumberland Recreation Facebook page. I know Elevate promotes it. It usually finds its way onto the Cumberland bulletin board page that way.
Yeah, so it might be nice for the village to put out something that says we've given them an exemption till this time. Heads up, get
Yeah,
your
good idea.
earplugs. If you're he obviously works really early in the morning, that person. So I feel for him, but yeah. Okay, there's a recommendation there.
I'll move that council direct the chief administrative officer to approve an exemption to the noise control bylaw number 950 2012 from 8 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. on Thursday evenings during July and August 2024 for the summer concert series performances in Village Square.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? That is carried as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Bevan Industrial Land Servicing Strategy. Courtney.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. And I have Rob up here
Good
together as
dynamic
well. So he has
duo.
an important role in this project. So I'm really pleased to present to Council the Bevan Industrial Land Servicing Strategy, another step in our work towards developing this Bevan industrial area. So this report presents this servicing strategy, and it also provides an update to you on the Bevan Industrial Lands Implementation Plan. Completion of the servicing strategy was an objective of your last strategic plan, and progress on this Bevan Lands Implementation Plan, sort of more steps on a broader picture of development of this area, is an objective of your current strategic plan. So the purpose of doing this servicing strategy was to provide us with a stronger understanding of potential development scenarios in the Bevan industrial area and their possible off-site servicing requirements and servicing cost implications. Recent completion of the water main extension through subdivision and completed by the developer along Bevan Road to Beck Avenue facilitated construction of the new Tree Island Yoga facility and the Drury Electric head office in this new 6-lot industrial subdivision. Their next phase subdivision is currently in the pre-application stage. So this servicing strategy, it covers water supply, distribution, sanitary sewer collection, rainwater collection, storm drainage, and transportation. And it's going to be very helpful in our discussions with the developer in the next phase subdivision and in the years to come. The strategy also explores cost recovery options, basically giving us advice and informing ongoing discussions with the landowners and informing our capital planning budget. So we're going to be reviewing this strategy and coming back to council if there's any recommendations in the future for the capital budget planning, for example. So I won't go into the details of the plan itself. It's all posted to our website now, so it's available for the development community to review and yourselves. But I do want to give you a brief update on the Industrial Lands Implementation Plan. So the Bevan Industrial Lands Concept Plan was developed in 2019-2020, and shortly thereafter, we put together, it's really a short kind of working document to help us guide us through implementing any of the recommendations in that plan. And it's also on our website. And this is the first time I'm reporting back to council on this implementation plan specifically since it was adopted. And I'm really happy to report that quite a lot has been completed. The servicing strategy, DCC bylaw update, I mean, that was underway anyway, but we added it to the implementation plan because it was a really important part of that picture. Protection of Morrison Creek headwaters, that was not due to actions of the village, but really to the conservation community, which was an amazing acquisition for conservation that does achieve a goal of the Bevan concept plan. Delegating development permit issuance to staff through the modernization project. We're almost completed the transportation master plan. There are some supplemental standards underway as another action. The official community plan update is underway, and that will speak to not the next phase subdivision, but the following phase, what we're calling phase 3, where it's in an area where some OCP and zoning amendments would need to take place for the further development in that area. And there's really just one item that hasn't started, and that's it's kind of a very specific thing about ensuring direction to the approving officer for future park dedication within the industrial lands area. So we have yet to start that one, but everything else is either complete or underway in that implementation plan. So with that, we're here to answer any questions, should you have any.
All righty. Council, questions? Councillor Tyrion?
Yep, I've got a few. Thanks, Courtney. My main question is going to be the same one I've been asking since before I got here. is there a study coming that's going to show whether we'll raise enough taxes to pay for the long-term life cycle costs of this infrastructure? There's $30+ million worth of infrastructure that's on these, that's projected, that will become ours, and then we will have to look after it from then on. And I'm just wondering, are we going to be raising enough taxes out there to pay for this? Where's the break-even point? How many lots have to be sold, et cetera? I'm pretty sure right now with just what's out there, we're not paying for that water line at this point in time.
Yes. Yes, the answer is yes. Through a grant we have from the Rural Economic Diversification Fund, we are actually at the beginning stages of an analysis, a fiscal analysis, including that. So that's underway and expected to be completed in 2024.
Okay, good. And then, yeah, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to talk about all of this until we know whether it's actually going to be of a benefit to the village or not. Has there been any consideration of getting water from the CVRD? Their wastewater treatment plant is actually closer to this development than, or not their
Water.
their new water treatment plant, not their wastewater treatment. Their new, I've got that on my brain too. Their new water treatment plant is actually closer to this development than our water is.
Can you help with that?
I would say that ship sailed when, a number of years ago, when the village decided to stick with its own water supply system and not contribute anything towards that project. It would be very challenging, I think, to get a connection at this point without paying some major upfront capital costs.
Okay.
We have had, I can't remember when, but we did have a general discussion about that feasibility, and it's, yeah, I don't think the opportunity is there.
Okay.
So the village was willing to commit financially, so.
All right. It was just something I was wondering if it had been considered, because it would also mean that we would have redundancy for our water supply at some, or could have in the future in that way. What is SEI? Sorry.
Oh,
An
Sensitive
acronym I didn't-
ecosystem inventory.
What?
Sensitive ecosystem inventory, something like that.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, I figured it had to do something like that. And yes, I would like to see, as we're going through the OCP, that we put in healthy buffers to the new Morrison Creek lands that are out there, and make sure that we're protecting the ecological assets out there. Thank you.
Anybody else? Questions? Comments? Go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah,
Sorry,
in the-
Councillor Kettler.
In the transportation part, it says sidewalks and trails. So the sidewalks are being put in on the side streets, not on the main Bevan, right?
Yeah, that's correct, I think. Anything to add there? Yeah, so we're talking about the multi-use path on Bevan itself, and
Yeah.
then
So, but not a sidewalk.
not a
It's
sidewalk.
going to be a multi-use path.
That's correct.
And are they already putting it in? Is that what's on the landfill side? That flat,
Yeah,
they're doing a ditch and then a flat.
and that's right.
That's where okay.
Yeah.
So I thought the multi-use path was going to go on the other side. So can we also have like a treed buffer for that multi-use path? Because it would be quite
Trucks.
Yeah.
yeah, just it would be a nicer experience for people if there were trees there.
You mean between the
Yep.
path and the road, or the path and the industrial park?
Well, so I thought it was going to be on the other side of the street. So it's on the
Right.
on the landfill side, but I thought it was going to be on the other side. Then we could have had a treed buffer
Right.
on
Yeah.
both sides of a
Yeah.
path, of a multi-use
Right.
path.
Yeah, we'd say, so our first experience with actually designing it, or having the applicant design it, was with that Beck Avenue 6-lot subdivision. So a short a stretch of path on either side of where Beck Avenue intersects with Bevan. And that is one of the things, kind of a lesson learned, is that we would like to see an area for planting between that ditch and the path. So we're looking at that for the future phases.
Okay, because there's only that one little bit so far. It's not very
Yes,
long.
that's
Yeah.
right.
Okay, so the rest of it could have that.
Is that
Do
what
we
you
have,
mean?
do we have much of a right of way on the other side that we could have had the trail there, or?
Can you speak to the side of the road the trail's on?
So the right of way on the east side or north side?
Yeah.
Yeah, on the north side.
No, we haven't acquired any additional right of way there. It's just on the development side so
Okay.
far.
Right.
So that's why it was chosen to be there. Yeah.
And maybe to add to that, we have an agreement with the regional district to create more space in front of the landfill than there currently is for the path through SRW. And we negotiated that with their rezoning for the leachate treatment area.
Right, because the fence right now is probably right on that path. Right?
I think that the fence might be a pinch point
Yeah.
because I'm not sure they can move that, but they now own quite a bit of land north of the fence up towards Beck Avenue. And
Yeah.
in that area, there's nothing in the way of having a wider path there.
Okay. But it would have to connect through that first portion.
It would, yeah. Yeah. So it might be, you might be more constrained in that first portion and
Right.
then widen up
Okay,
further north.
thanks.
Okay. Anybody else? Questions? The servicing strategy and the costing that we're doing, are we looking at all at the comparison of septics that would be regularly monitored versus putting a wastewater line all the way out there in terms of cost and efficiency and stuff like that? Or have we just, we want those hookups to help pay for our system?
Like engineering?
Yeah, I would say there should be a priority to extend the sewer out there to help protect the environment. So you don't want to end up with a whole bunch of septic fields, right? So we allow them in this first 6 lot development because we're just not ready for a wastewater line extension. And there's still some challenges around how we hook it into the existing system, whether it's Hope Road or wherever, and what that future looks like as far as a lift station and servicing also some of the businesses along Cumberland Road. So there still needs to be some study and further analysis on that. But I would say, it should be a priority to extend sewer out there.
Yeah, I agree with we don't want to contaminate the aquifer at all, but I think a well-designed septic system doesn't. And I think, and I'm concerned that extending the waste, I'm concerned about the cost and how we'll ever recover that cost. But yes, agreed, we don't want to damage the aquifer.
I would say, and part of the strategy or part of the recommendations in this report are some of the financial strategies around recovering some of the costs. So similar to the roads and the water becoming DCC projects, I would suggest that the sanitary also would become DCC project, especially the connection piece. If we were to have to implement some improvements at Hope and Cumberland Road with a lift station or something like that. so.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I have a bit of resistance to fully servicing the area. I want industrial development out there because I know we need it for our tax base, but I also fear that if we put servicing out there, then we're going to get a rash of residential development, and then that's going to lead to urban sprawl. So how do we design this servicing so that it serves the industrial area but doesn't provide a mechanism for, what we don't want out there? And maybe that's just a costing exercise as well. I don't know. Hopefully there'll be some feedback on those costs and the different servicing levels through that complete communities grant.
Yeah, I mean, your OCR, OCP doesn't currently allow any residential development
Yeah.
there. And I think once you have servicing going right past vacant land, you're definitely will get pressure from the owners to develop and maybe others. And that really comes down to the community plan.
Yeah.
And there could be a point in the future where maybe it does make sense for residential development there, but maybe not.
Yeah.
And it really can, it can be controlled through your land use policies.
Okay. And then the other thing I just want us to be thinking about is that is as we know, a route to the lake in the summer. And if we pave that road, that will become a major thoroughfare for traffic out to that side of the lake. And given that it is in an industrial zone and a very straight, flat road, I suspect there will be other things happening out there. And so we just want to be aware of that when we're looking at road design and stuff. People are always looking for straight, flat roads for doing certain activities that we wouldn't want to encourage. Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else? Anything else?
Skateboarders.
Do you, I just had one, do you see any, in your crystal ball, any grant money coming down the pipe for this type of infrastructure for light industry and for things like that? Or I know it's wishful thinking, but that could be one consideration.
Well, I mean, right now we are looking at development paying for the cost,
Yeah.
the initial cost of installation. To Councillor Therian's question, the life cycle cost is a different matter. So in terms of the initial cost paid through development, like typically fronted by the developer, and then they have some cost recovery scheme in place to over time, 15, 20 years, as more of the land develops, recoup that upfront cost from those who are developing later. Where we have DCC projects, there's some contribution from our DCCs, but we're not looking for the village to upfront that cost, typically. But yet there are some grants available. So on Union Road, we are looking at the ability to access some grant funds for some infrastructure as it relates to village projects. So there is that opportunity there for different scenarios.
So wishful thinking is appropriate.
I know it's
Well, just one thing I will add. One thing I will add is we did get the water main through what Courtney's talking about
Yeah.
on Union Road, but that was later when it hadn't been realized because the original grant was for Bevan for the water main, and it was not authorized. It wasn't approved. So then later on, after they had already built it, the grantor came back with that it hadn't been utilized, and we were able to get that, but it wasn't approved. It was oversubscribed, and I'm not sure that was top of their priority, was that type of development.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So there's recommendation there, if that's all we have for questions. Did you have another question?
Yeah, just one more. Sorry. I'm just wondering on action 8. What's the need for creating the one development permit area and bringing all of? Is that something that's going to be applied throughout the village, or is that going to be Bevan specific? Or I'm just wondering the reasoning behind it, or what that's going to look like.
Yeah, the idea was for it to be Bevan specific, and it related to streamlining development applications, as well as recognizing that the development permit area we currently have for industrial isn't a good fit for Bevan. It's a better fit for our other smaller industrial areas like Cumberland Road. But there's just some mismatches. I can't think of any examples right now, but we decided there was really a need to tailor a new development permit area just for Bevan. And while we're at it, if we can make it just one for that area, it simplifies the process.
Okay. Yep, thank you.
Okay, nothing else? There's a recommendation
I'll
there.
move the council receive the Bevan Industrial Land Servicing Strategy and the update to the Bevan Industrial Lands implementation plan for information.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. And all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And next up is the Japanese Canadian Legacies Grant Application Report. Come on back, Ryan.
Thank you. So the background of this, of course, is in this past August, the village found out that we had been sort of pre-selected by the Japanese Canadian Legacies Society to receive up to $400,000 in funding. Funding would be intended to support the planning and development of heritage sites where the public can gather and learn about the history of Japanese Canadians in the region, and in particular to promote public awareness of pre-war and wartime Japanese history through enduring interpretive heritage projects. So that kicked off a whole planning process. We've partnered with the museum and some other, primarily the museum, but chatting with the CVRD as well. And yeah, we've been putting together a project to, well, as you know, we came to you about this initially. So yeah, the timeline has been tight to put this all together, but we've cobbled it all together, and we've got something that's ready to be sent off for the draft application later this week, because the deadline is March 1st. So basically, we just wanted to give you a chance to see what we're proposing to propose, and yeah, provide feedback and go from there. So as you saw in the report, the project is divided into several nodes or locations. 3 of those are within the village of Cumberland. Japanese Canadian Legacies wanted to include some sites outside within the Comox Valley, but outside of Cumberland. So we've also proposed, I suppose tentatively proposed, a couple of sites within the CVRD. Now those sites are dependent on CVRD approval, essentially. We've been discussing them at a staff level, and we think that we've got enough that we feel confident putting it forward in an application, but we're acknowledging that, you know, the risk of this is that it has to be approved by a body that isn't us. So going back to the project sites, sort of the key node of the project is a refurbishment of the baseball diamond, the West Baseball Diamond at Village Park. And that came from a conversation just around the history of baseball within the local Japanese community. Japanese Canadians were, I believe they built the first baseball diamonds in Cumberland. And baseball just became a real, from what I understand, a real unifying force. It was a way that the Japanese Canadians really integrated themselves within the broader community. And so we tied in that story with the fact that baseball over the last couple of years is starting to see a little bit of a resurgence again at the minor level in Cumberland. We're getting some requests from Comox Valley Minor Baseball Association to improve our infrastructure, which is in not great state of repair. So the project, it would involve redoing the dugouts, doing another, or redoing the fencing, the backstop, make it a little bit more robust, adding some better storage areas for multiple users, baseball and I believe lacrosse or rugby rugby uses it as well. And then it would all be tied together with some interpretive paneling, just talking about the history of baseball in the community and what the Japanese Canadians brought to the community. So that is the sort of the primary node, the centerpiece. Elsewhere in the village, we are hoping to do some upgrades at the Japanese cemetery. So some new perimeter fencing, again, new interpretive signage, possibly a custom gate feature as you enter the cemetery, and then hopefully the restoration of some of those headstones, the repainting, and get them looking close to how they used to. And then the third location in the village is at the new Nikkei Park near the old number 5 Japanese town site. And that would again include some interpretive signage, hopefully the planting of some feature trees, installation of some irrigation to keep them all happy and healthy. And then a surface upgrade of the adjacent North Colliery Trail, which is used by a lot of kids going off to school and whatnot. The 2 sites within the CVRD that have been identified are the Royston Seaside Trail and the Cumberland to Royston Trail, or the Joe Walker Park. I can't really speak in a lot of detail to what may happen at those sites because we don't know exactly. but hopefully they'll be part of it. So altogether, we've gotten some Class D budget estimates for the village component anyways, and then we've extrapolated that into what it might look like for the CVRD sites. We are estimating that the total project for everything we are hoping to accomplish would be $427,500. We're hoping, we're hoping to have some third-party contributions of in the neighborhood of $30,000, although that is also nowhere near confirmed. But the grant, the amount we expect to request in the application will be $397,500. Yeah, construction wouldn't be beginning until probably 2025. We might do some design work in 2024 if all goes well, possibly some work at the cemetery later this year. But really the bulk of it wouldn't get started till 2025. All the projects have to be completed by March 2027. And one key aspect is that any work we do with a ball diamond at Village Park would wait until we do our Village Park Master Plan, which is slated for next year, just to make sure that it's all within the grand vision for the plan. Yeah, and maybe I'll leave it at that and put it forward for questions.
Okay.
Hopefully I'll
thank
have some answers.
Yes, hopefully you will. Okay, questions? Anybody?
No questions? Looking forward to this moving forward. I have seen people working on the ball diamond. Is that part of that? Like, I've seen
Yeah, it
staff.
looks like something
there's a
happened to
major
the
overhaul.
grass.
Yeah, there was some field work done. Yeah, I can't remember the term for it, but yeah, improvements to the field make the grass all nice and pretty.
So $400,000 is not a lot of money. So we're asking for each one of these, or they're going to choose some of them, or like what will this process? Can
Yeah.
we weight it somehow? Like, can we say we want to prefer, fixing up the cemetery, for instance? Prioritize that, or the
We're going to
baseball
apply
diamond,
for
or-
all of them. Well, I mean, we don't really know what
Yeah.
we're going to get back from them. We have been speaking with staff at the JCL throughout this, so they have an idea of what we're going to propose. They love the idea of the ball diamond. I mean, they were reasonably supportive of everything we're putting forward. I think the cemetery would have been, I think, the second one that they were.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
ball diamond, very excited. Cemetery, they saw the value in that.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we'll kind of see what they come
What they
back
pull
with.
out. Yeah, I'm curious. I don't understand the historical connection with the Seaside Trail. Like, I know there was the Royston Trail went to the mill, and there's sites along that way, but do you
Yeah,
know?
the mill is really the connection.
Okay.
It was site of a Buddhist temple. Is that right?
I think there was a significant community at the lumber mill and a school and
Oh,
the church, but
The mill itself is on private land, so we can't do anything with that.
Right.
So the idea of the Royston to Cumberland Trail was brought in as a location that we could have the CVRD has jurisdiction over, that we could install something that's fairly near that site. And if that node goes forward, it would be a fairly minor, like we're talking maybe a commemorative plaque or some kind of informational
or
sign.
signage like we have in Japanese Town or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions or
Nope,
thoughts?
this all looks great to me.
Yeah.
I'd love to see.
Thanks for
Settled.
your work
Yep.
on it. Thanks for working with the committee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did I mention the museum is very heavily involved?
Yes.
Yeah, they'll be working on all the interpretive
Yeah.
elements and that kind of
We know who
spearheading
wrote
that.
it, Ryan. We
Yeah.
know.
I think you led with that.
Thank you so much. So there's a recommendation there, Council.
I'll move that council support the submission of a grant application to the Japanese Canadian Legacy Society for the purposes of funding the proposed heritage sites project Echoes of Community, revitalizing Japanese Canadian heritage in Cumberland and the Comox Valley.
Second.
Thank you, and all in favor? Awesome. And rolling into Lower Perseverance Draft Conservation Plan.
Yeah, so this one basically just purpose is to give you an update on, provide you a draft of the plan because I don't believe you've seen that yet. And then just an update on our plan for engagement with KFN. So I think you probably know a bit of the background about the land itself, and the goals, of course, for this conservation plan is really just to create a plan for preserving the underlying values of the land: drinking water protection, ecological protection, hydrological function, and cultural values of the land. Really, the purpose of this report isn't so much to go into the granular details of it. If you have questions about the plan, I'll do my best to respond. Honestly, I've been fairly involved in the JCL these past couple of weeks, but I'll do my best. My intention would be to provide more detail on the bulk of the plan itself when we present it at a later date. But really right now, I just want to talk about the First Nations engagement. So KFN was presented with project updates in 2019 and 2021. They were invited to let the team know what kind of engagement they wanted. Some KFN members had participated in some of the discussions, but at the time there was no formal KFN representation. And particularly at the meeting in 2023, when the draft conservation plan was presented, there was no KFN representation there. And so really what we want to do is make sure that we give the process time for meaningful engagement. So yeah, that's the intention is to provide you with the document so you can look at it, and just to let you know that we are going to continue to reach out to KFN, and we'll bring it back once we have had their engagement and have incorporated any of their feedback.
Anybody have questions? Go ahead, Councillor.
My computer decided to update right at this time. But yeah, I was wondering. So it's great. I'm so happy to see this, and I know there's a lot of people who have contributed to this. One of the really nice parts was the archaeological history that was put in there about Comox First Nation and their use of that area. The unfortunate part is that before there was a dam, of course, the shoreline was much lower, and so most of the area that First Nations would have inhabited then would have been very close to that lower shoreline, which is now underwater, so they can't access a lot of those archaeological sites. And I guess the other downside is that the area has been so used for industrial purposes, for all the mine tailings, all the trees being cut multiple times, that there's very little evidence of First Nation archaeological evidence there because it's all been destroyed. So, but it's good to have that understanding that there would have been a lot of evidence that it was well used, and that there still is a very strong connection. And we have that picture here in the council chambers of Quinish and the creation story of the Comox First Nation here. So a very strong spiritual connection to the area as well. So I think that's really important for the general public to be aware of, and it was great that that was part of this report. One of the things I had issue with was the watershed protection plan, and I think we talked about this before. The risk ratings that they give different activities around the lake, and they gave hiking and swimming the same risk level as industrial logging. And I think that is a problem, and it said it was reviewed again in this report, and they didn't change it. They felt that it still is that risk level. But I think that's sort of disingenuous. We talk about how we can mitigate impacts to our watershed, and we'll put a path here and a bridge there and signage here, but then that overall bigger picture of having half a mountainside denuded isn't part of this picture. And I think that's a mistake to not highlight that. You know, it is mentioned that an intact watershed is the best way to protect against future calamity, climate change, drought, these atmospheric rivers. But we're not asking the forest industry to do anything in this report or otherwise. So I think that's a real loss with this report, that we do need to be talking about that. And we can do all these other things, but we have to look big picture on what is really impacting our watershed.
Yeah, and I mean, we do have other initiatives that are going on right now to explore the watershed on a more macro level, more holistic view of it, to answer some of those questions and hopefully work towards preserving the hydrological function of the watershed. Yeah, this report really only spoke to this one, well, these few little properties that are, I mean, the idea is to preserve them ecologically, and logging, I don't think, at least in the foreseeable future, isn't a specific concern with these particular properties, but definitely within the broader watershed is something we want to look at.
Yeah, I just meant it in reference because they did talk about the watershed protection plan in here
Okay.
and a revisitation of it as part of this report. And that's where I was kind of like, okay, well, if we're going to do that, then we do need to take it big picture. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else?
Thanks for that.
Thanks for sharing the technology. Yep. Yes, thank you. Very much appreciate the patience with the engagement. I think it's really important. It's obviously a really important area to Comox and all of their various peoples. And yeah, we need to do that in a good way. So thanks for that and for all the other partners that have contributed to this. There's a recommendation there.
I'll move the council direct staff to work with the Comox Valley Regional District and the Cumberland Community Forest Society to bring the draft conservation plan for the lands of Comox Lake and Perseverance Creek forward for collaborative dialogue with the Comox First Nation, and that council direct staff to report back with the revised draft of the conservation plan for the lands at Comox Lake and Perseverance Creek once Comox First Nation has had the opportunity to engage in a meaningful way and the nation's concerns, if any, have been addressed in the document.
Second.
All in favor? And that is carried.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Local Government Development Approvals Program Grant Application. Courtney's back.
I'm back. Okay, the purpose of this report is to seek council direction to submit an application for funding under the UBCM Local Government Development Approvals Program in support of continuation of the review and modernization of the village's development approvals process. The grant application requires a council resolution supporting the application and agreeing to be responsible for overall grant management. So applications are due on March 8th. This is the last council meeting before then. If council does provide direction to make the application, then we will work on our detailed scope and budget and submit it. The maximum grant amount is $150,000. Our amount requested could be less than that, but we're asking for approval to submit up to $150,000. We were successful in receiving this grant, well, a similar grant under the same program in 2021. We received just shy of $230,000, and that project is complete. We accomplished quite a few things. Some highlights are the accessory dwelling unit approval process streamlining, removing the requirement for a development permit, creating a guide to help applicants through the application process. And since then, we've had quite a number go directly to building permit, and people have benefited from that quicker and less expensive approval process. Their council has delegated to staff issuance of minor development variance permits and some development permits. We have new application guides for the public created they were created and they have just been posted on our website. We're kind of working out some kinks, so we'll probably do some public communications about that in the next week or so, but you can have a look at those now. And a new internal processing manual for staff, which is quite a bit of work, and it's done, but we have the Word version, so as we use it, we see with some little tweaks that we need to make, and that's just fantastic for streamlining things on our end and helping us as we bring in new staff. We have an IMAP tutorial video on the website to assist the public, realtors in particular, with navigating our GIS system and application guides, so we can direct them to that rather than walking them through how to find their zoning all of the time, which should help us save time. We digitize building permit plans, and this was a while ago, but after the election, consultant held an orientation session for new councillors regarding a lot of things around this modernization project. So for 2024, what's left? Well, what we're looking at as a potential scope of the application would be more review of the building permit process to identify opportunities for greater efficiency and effectiveness. The project that we did already, it focused more on the other planning approvals, not building permits. And that's a lot of our activity, and it's different in many ways. So we could see a real benefit in getting into that process some more. We also didn't touch the subdivision process. That's kind of its own separate thing. So we see an opportunity for streamlining of that, and perhaps looking at that bylaw and that information for applicants and our internal processing. And looking at improving our own internal communications through our development review team. That seems to come up a lot in the review the province does about streamlining approvals, which is such a hot topic now with housing. How to really streamline your internal team to have great communication. So we see even more improvements there. And then lastly, we could see facilitating collaboration with the development community. You might ask, I certainly did, do we even have time to make this application and do all this work, even though it's 100% grant funded? And I think that this really is a great opportunity, and I do think it's worth investing a few hours to submit the grant application now, in the hope that if we receive it, it would be really beneficial.
Awesome, thank you. Questions?
So yeah, that was basically going to be my question. So thanks for that. And then I'm understanding that most of this work will be consultant-led then, and won't be taking up staff time from other things if the application is accepted.
Yeah, that's correct. It always does take some staff time to participate in the work of the consultant, but it would be led. I imagine close to 100% of the funding we received would be to pay consulting fees.
That was my second question. Is there any provisions in here for introducing new technology, and would you be able to use some of this grant money for that, such as licensing or?
Something really interesting about this round of the funding is that they specifically say those are not eligible costs.
Oh, wow.
The previous round they were, like buying software and licensing fees. So right now they've decided they really want to focus on the other stuff.
Okay.
Okay,
Still worthwhile.
still worthwhile. I have a question around the so I don't see policy development in here, so is that also an ineligible? So I'm thinking we're going to have a whole bunch of new policy to develop after our OCP, and while we're integrating that into our planning processes, could we use some of this money to do that?
Well,
Or is that a separate?
the scope, the grant program comes directly from the 2019 development approvals process review that the province did. And this preliminary scope comes directly from the types of efficiencies that provincial report talked about, them wanting local governments to do. So, I mean, possibly, I'm not sure exactly what you have in mind. There could be something I'm not thinking of that would also help implement the OCP.
Yeah, and I don't know exactly what I mean either. I just think there's going to be a bunch of that work coming. And it's, yeah, maybe there are efficiencies that could happen through this grant that will assist that, but I'll leave that to you. Anything else? Or there's a recommendation there.
Move the council direct staff to submit an application to the Union of BC Municipalities Local Government Development Approval Program for funding to continue the review and modernization of the Village of Cumberland's development approvals process with a maximum project value of $150,000, and the council is willing to provide overall grant management.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
Bylaws, wastewater upgrade project loan authorization bylaw and alternative approval process. Hi, Annie.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Following the wastewater project update provided at the last meeting and subsequent 1.52 million budget increase approved by Council, this report now recommends Council to consider additional borrowing to fund the additional cost. The purpose of this report is to present Council the loan authorization bylaw for the borrowing of an amount of up to 2.5 million for the wastewater upgrade project for consideration of first 3 readings, and present information on the 2 different approaches to obtain electoral approval for the long-term borrowing. Staff recommends considering borrowing an additional amount of 2.5 million. The long-term borrowing in the amount of 4.4 million is already approved for the project. If the related debt was repaid through a special parcel tax, this would result in an estimated amount of $199 per parcel per year for 20 years, starting in 2026 when the project is completed. And borrowing an additional 2.5 million would add about $113 to the parcel tax for an estimated $312 per parcel. Additional long-term borrowing requires electoral approval, which can be obtained via assent voting or alternative approval process. Assent voting or referendum allows electors to vote on whether a proposal would move forward or not. Assent of the electors is obtained if a majority of the votes counted are in favor of the bylaw or question and conducted in the same manner as a local election. Alternative approval process, or AAP, is a form of approval that allows electors to indicate whether they are against a local government proposal. If the village receives electoral response forms from less than 10% of the estimated number of electors before the prescribed deadline, the council would be able to proceed with adoption of the loan authorization bylaw. From an administrative point of view, the AAP is a faster process and requires less financial and staff resources. Assent voting is more costly and also requires more administrative support, again similar to the local election. If an AAP is not successful, a council may choose to seek electoral approval through assent voting, which could take place in the fall in our situation here. So staff recommend proceeding with an AAP given that the wastewater treatment plant treatment improvements have been mandated by the province for environmental reasons. The cost impact for further delays to resume the project design and construction, and the limited option of funding, and also simplicity of approach. And based on the timeline of the last couple AAP held by the village, a reasonable timeline could start at the end of February and end in June. And even with a successful AAP, council can consider can change its mind and decide for whatever reason not to proceed with the borrowing or borrow a reduced amount. So based on this information, staff recommends council to give first 3 readings to the loan authorization bylaw and direct that electoral approval for the wastewater project be sought to borrow up to 2.5 million for a term of 20 years by means of an alternative approval process. Do you have any questions?
Thank you. Questions? Go ahead, Councillor.
More just a comment for the people that are going to be watching this out there. The cost overruns at the wastewater treatment plant are unfortunate, but there they are. This council has voted to continue with the project. We've basically raided all of our reserve funds at this point to pay for it. And I'm not wrong in assuming that the purpose of this borrowing is to repay most of those contingency funds and reserve funds. Is that right?
Yeah, well, either repay or we can just rescind the previous council decision to use the funding from reserve.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's, the money will be going back into our reserves so that we carry a healthy reserve going forward.
In case of emergency.
Yep.
And also the fact that the fines of potentially $1 million a day hang heavily over the village if we don't carry on with this project.
Yep.
So that's something that weighs heavily on council as well. So.
And
Go
through
ahead.
the mayor, if you don't mind, and what we have managed to fund is only 1.52 anyway, and the budget increase is required like at least 2.13 million, and so we do not have enough reserves to fund the overage at this point.
Right. And just for clarification, the alternative approval process saves us tens of thousands of dollars and a whole bunch of staff time, and it's also quicker, and that's why we want to go this route. Any other comments or questions?
I agree with staff's recommendation.
Okay. Shall I move?
I just have one more. So I think the bylaw has to state how we're paying it back, yes?
It doesn't.
Oh, it doesn't. So
No.
we could change that later
Yeah,
if we figured out a different
and
way.
staff was thinking of bringing some options during
Okay.
budget process later in the fall, early fall. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Go for it.
Okay, I'll move that council give first, second, and third reading to the wastewater upgrade project loan authorization number 2, bylaw number 1207, 2024, and that council direct the electoral approval for the wastewater project be sought to borrow up to 2.5 million for a term of 20 years under the wastewater upgrade project loan authorization number 2, bylaw number 1207, 2024, and that this approval be pursued by means of an alternative approval process.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. There's no new business. There is a Village Hall meeting planned for March 4th at 7 p.m. in council chambers. Any questions for question period? Roger?
Yes, I have a few questions in regards to item 10.3, the Japanese Canadian Legacies Grant application.
Roger, do you
report.
want to use the mic so the all our YouTube watchers can hear you?
Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening. For those who may not know me on YouTube land, my name is Roger Kishi, and I live here in the village of Cumberland. I have some questions in regards to item 10.3, the Japanese Canadian Legacies Grant Application Report. I'd just like to say a couple things first before I ask the questions. And it was myself and Mitzi, who organizes the Obone cleanup crew, who were sent the letter from the JCLS, the Legacy Society, and then I forwarded that letter to the village in July of last year. And Mitzi and I were involved in the initial meetings with village staff and the JCLS. And I guess my first question, or my first concern, is that I was actually pretty surprised to see this on the council agenda for tonight, because there was no consultation with the local Japanese Canadian community. And I guess so, with that concern, my first question to staff or to council would be, is there still going to be an opportunity for the local Japanese Canadian community to have some input into the project?
I think so my understanding of the grant approval process is that I'm not going to know the acronym either, the committee, the JCLS, thank you, felt strongly about which proposals they liked, and that's what village staff worked with. And given that the grant application is due imminently, I'm not sure how we would consult, but probably as the approval comes in and we look at actually what we're doing, that might be a point of consultation through the museum, is what I would suggest, potentially. Ryan, do you want to speak to that?
I'll stay here then.
Yeah, so consultation with the community is definitely going to be part of the plan. Like you, Roger, I think we initially expected some consultation was going to happen before the application needed to be submitted. Timelines being what they were, and just through kind of some communication with JCLS, we determined that their message was, get your application in, like they really want to see Cumberland do something with this. So the idea is get the application in with the broad strokes, and definitely consultation with the community is going to be part of it going forward. On our end, it'll be led by the Museum and Archives in consultation with JCLS. But yeah, it will go forward.
Great, thank you. Carry on, Roger.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that makes me feel a bit better. But I guess the other things that and in the staff report, they referred to the projects or the pieces in the project application in conjunction with the regional district are still pretty gray. I don't know the way that the different pieces of the project are sort of listed, whether or not that is actually like a priority list, or is that just an overall list? Because I think that if there's all these gray areas with the regional district participation, or what it might even actually include, of whether or not they should be, if this is a priority list, they should be lower down on the priority, because there's so much gray area with them.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of priority, we certainly had the Village Park node as the primary primary aspect of it, and I didn't list them here. So the Royston Seaside Trail and Nikkei Park, we had listed as secondary sites, so that second in priority, and then the tertiary nodes. Possibly Nikkei was tertiary as well. It was kind of straddling the line. And then that Cumberland to Royston Trail would have been a tertiary site as well. CVRD the CVRD sites were brought into the project upon really the recommendation of JCLS. And it has been somewhat challenging just trying to figure out how best to coordinate it all with multiple jurisdictions and all that. So like I said, we've been talking to them on a staff level. We've got that staff level support, which we acknowledge is not formal support. So yeah, the plan is to include it in the application. We know that JCLS is very supportive of it. Hope that the CVRD formal support comes through, and adjust as needed going forward.
My understanding is from the JCLS, in sort of side conversations that I've had with some of their staff, is that their interest really in Royston was the old Royston Temple, and whether or not they're, even though it is privately owned right now, in the past years, the private owner has expressed interest about restoring the temple. And a few years, 2 or 3 years ago, when the Obon tour came here, they actually toured the building, and the owner cleaned it up. Right now, it's being used as a storage area for all the parts from the wrecking yard. But the people the people who came on the Obon tour got to tour the inside of the building, and you could still tell where the shrine was, because the shrine is actually in the Glenbow Museum in Calgary. It made its way to Alberta during the war. And there has been some preliminary discussions with the Glenbow Museum of returning the shrine to Cumberland or to Royston or the Comox Valley. But of course, a museum like the Glenbow isn't going to give it to somewhere where there's no place for it to be stored or kept properly. And the JCLS is aware of all those things too. So I think that's what their real interest is around that. So, the baseball diamond piece sort of was a bit shocking to me, because yes, there was interest in the Japanese Canadian community in Cumberland of baseball, but I'm not sure that the baseball diamonds were constructed by the Japanese community in the village park or in any village facilities. It would have been in the Japanese town sites or down at the Royston Mill, where the temple building is still standing. Yeah. And so I would be interested in seeing, more about the budgeting breakdown, and if out of the funding, if half of it is going to, or the majority of it is going to the baseball diamond, and maybe not going towards the cemetery or the number 1 or number 5 town sites, I would be very concerned about that. So I don't know if you don't have all the costings out yet, but can you say about, like, for the breakdown of the 3 pieces that are physically going to be in Cumberland, could you ballpark? You put that in your report as well. The percentage that the ball diamond might be, and then the other projects potentially with the cemetery and the number 5 Japanese town site.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I feel like the ballpark. Well, if we look at those 3 sites, I mean, it's maybe 2/3, a third. Like, yeah. Again, speaking off the top of my head, maybe I shouldn't be doing that. As far as, like, going back to the mill site, my understanding was that we couldn't really do anything with that site with the grant because it's a private site, private ownership. And then with the ball diamond, yeah, the location, it's right, it's not where the original ball diamonds were, but it was more about the cultural aspects and the integration in the community, the story rather than the specific location. I don't know if that gives you an answer.
I might be opening up a can of worms here, Roger, but it seems to me that the shrine itself is quite an important component for you. And how big is it, and is there perhaps a capacity for that to be, maybe I'm just throwing relocated here, possibly to the museum, or
From what I understand, well, I'm not quite sure the exact size of it, but it would probably be 2 of these tables together. So it ended up going to some small town in Alberta, anyways, and to where the Japanese had been interned to. Mm-hmm. And then that town had basically, well, it doesn't. I guess the Japanese community doesn't exist in that town anymore. So it ended up in the Glenbow Museum in Calgary, and it was on display apparently up until about 2 or 3 years ago, and now it's just in storage. What I'm expressing is interest of a number of people who are aware of the shrine, and they have expressed an interest the past few years. A lot of some of them come on the Abone tour every year. It would be really nice to see that shrine come back to the Comox Valley. But it's just like Indigenous artifacts. The museums who own them or don't own them, who have them in their possession right now, are reluctant to give up those artifacts if there isn't an appropriate facility or storage space for them, because they are, well, I don't know if you could call them antiquities. I guess they're not. They're maybe. This shrine's probably just over 100 years old, it would be. Well, there's an interest of the ever smaller growing population of Japanese Canadians who are aware of it, and then there's the hope of it returning back to where it was.
Is there a possibility of that conversation happening then along this priority list? That
Yeah, maybe what,
Japanese Canadians here would want this to be on this list, this situation to be resolved somehow?
Well, I agree with staff that this needs to move forward right now because of the deadline of this Friday. But from what staff has reported this evening, is that that this grant application that's going forward is sort of, it's not cast in concrete. It is still just a plan, a framework of what the project would be actually, or what the funding would actually be supporting. And from what I understand is that a lot of the other projects within the Legacy Society, like there was a seniors health program that probably was delayed by about a year because of the process to set it up. And then there's been a scholarship program, and there's been a community events program, and other things like that have been, there's been delays through the Legacy Society of getting everything up and running. And there were delays in the heritage projects as well too, because I believe a coordinator for the program wasn't even hired until like October or something like that. Yeah. I'm hopeful that there is going to be further discussions, and that this application that's going forward is a framework for the work that could happen here in the Comox Valley.
Yeah.
I guess for myself and for others in the community, there's a lot focused around the cemetery because of the annual event of Obone.
Yeah.
There is the interest of the two town sites, and there is interest now because of the agreement with the developer for the number 5 Japanese town site and for the Nikkei Park. There could be an opportunity of just some developer putting a plaque up of something better than that.
Yeah.
And these funds through the Legacy Society could be used to do that. And the other question that I had too is it's only mentioned in the cemetery. Well, no, I guess it is. I guess it's mentioned a little bit in the the ball diamond as well, is about interpretative signage. But I understand too that the museum has been working quite a bit on virtual interpretation programs, and that they've got their infrastructure in place right now, and they have a couple of other of virtual interpretation. I don't know what you want to call it, services or something. You know, that people can access, and people can access that. From what I understand, anyways, is that where these interpretive signs are going to be put up in a couple of places, and I'm not sure which ones the museum has already done. Is there's a QR code on that sign, and people can scan them with their phone and get a full virtual interpretive presentation. So it's not just this one sign.
Mm-hmm.
You can get information on the whole thing and whatever else the museum has on site. So I'm hoping that the interpretation piece, can be something like that as well, because, like I say, is just to have a sign at the cemetery isn't going to be able to really explain when people go there. And right now there's nothing there at the cemetery to explain why the gravestones are laid out that way. And it's a story that has to be repeated every August for the Obone ceremonies. New people have to come there, or new people come and they go, well, why is this like this? And you got to take 10 or 15 minutes to explain to people, well, this is the reason why.
It would be so great to have, even to have those grave sites mapped and or a project like that. So maybe what we can do is ask you to continue to work with staff and the museum to influence the project as the result comes back, see what we get and see how we can.
Right. I have approached, 2, 4, 6, 7 folks who are local, about if they would be willing to be, sort of like an advisory committee or a steering committee or something like that. And so there are people that are willing to step forward to work with the museum or with the village or with the regional district on these projects.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much, Roger. I'm sure, I'm sure you'll be in touch with Roz, and Ryan will keep in touch as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Roger.
Okay. Any other questions? Any questions online? Nothing. Okay. Nobody else is here? Okay. Just adjournment then. We're going back to closed.
Okay, I'll move that council close the meeting to the public pursuant to Section 90 of the Community Charter to consider personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality or another position appointed by the municipality, and C, labor relations and other employee relations.
Second. Thank you. All in favor? And that's that.